Đây, quay lại một lần nữa cho mọi người xem nha. Đó, bản nhạc con gái viết ra vẽ được bấy nhiêu đây nè, là cô giáo vẽ nha. Mọi người có ai hiểu không? Chứ Loan không hiểu rồi đó.
Cái hình này với hai cái đó con nói cái đó là cô vẽ dùng nhạc của con đó là cô...
Không, hai cái bản đó là của con luôn hả?
Cái này của con, cái này là bản của con, mà cái đó là hai cái cô làm vẽ nữa. Cái cô vẽ của con là của cái này với cái đó của cô á. Sau lưng nó mi là có chú vẽ, qua kia là có cô khác á. Bây giờ cô cái này là có 3 người vẽ ở đây, ở trong phòng này là có 3 người á. Có một người ở đây, một người sau lưng, xong một người tút qua đó luôn.
Nhưng mà khi má mi quay mấy bản vẽ đó có được không? Có cần phải xin phép không á?
Con không có nói tới mấy người đó thì con không biết đâu.
Vậy thôi quay của con thôi ha. Để mất công nhiều khi phải xin phép mới được quay á. Đó, nãy giờ mọi người nghe gái ông giải thích không?
Welcome to the galleries. My name is Olivia. I am the Outreach and Educational Programming Coordinator here at the Art Galleries at ACC. And today we're going to be diving into our current exhibition, which is titled Narrated Memories. And in this particular exhibition, there are 3 alumni artists featured, but we're just going to be focusing on one, and her name is Laurie Frick. And specifically, we're going to be focusing on this really big, colorful mural behind me that's titled A Mood. And actually, some of you might know this. There's actually a musical composition which this mural is based off of. And so today we're going to hear that composition played live by these lovely performers from our music department downstairs. And here to talk more about that composition, which is also titled A Mood, is Elizabeth Berry, who is a composer for the composition and an ACC student, as well as Professor Stephen Saunders, who teaches composition classes here at ACC. But before I jump in too far, just a couple housekeeping notes. I just want to give everyone a moment to make sure that their phones are on silent or vibrate, because we will be listening to a live music performance today. Also, just to remind everyone that we see the galleries as a purely educational space. So that being said, I really encourage you to say whatever's on your mind, express your opinions, ask questions when we open it up for discussion. So, that being said, let me tell you a little bit more about this mural before we get into the composition behind it. Some of you might know how Elizabeth Berry's composition is related to this mural, but for those of us that don't, I'll start at square one. So this artist, her name is Laurie Frick. She's an Austin-based artist. And she actually has a background in tech, kind of a decades-long career in tech. And eventually she started taking classes at ACC and really established her artistic career in Austin. And she really calls upon her background in tech with her work, specifically with her use of data. So a lot of her work uses data as a foundation for her artistic practice. What she does, she kind of identifies as sort of a data artist. And even in her own words, she describes, painters, they use paint. Laurie, she uses data. So what she's not doing is not creating visualizations or graphs. Instead, she's sort of expressing her opinions as an artist and expressing herself as an artist through the use of data. So for this specific mural, she wanted to use musical composition as the data, as the foundation of this long and winding mural. And our exhibition team kind of wanted to go a step further and use a student or alumni composition specifically for the background of the mural. So we talked with our friends in the music department, who eventually put us in touch with Professor Saunders over here, who eventually put us in touch with Elizabeth Berry. And essentially, what Laurie Frick did is took Elizabeth's composition, A Mood, which you have sheet music if you're interested, and essentially she assigned different music notes to different colors, which you see in the mural. And a much better visualization of that, if you are a visual person, is on page 12 of these really nice exhibition catalogs. You can see how she took the sheet music, assigned each note a color, and then kind of place that pattern along this kind of flowy, organic shape in the mural. And so part of Laurie's work as a data artist is she's really interested in buttoning up this idea of data as being cold or artificial against really handmade or vibrant elements. So for example, with the mural, she chose very, very vibrant colors that kind of pop out at you. She also chose this kind of winding, organic, flowy shape to depict the mural in, to kind of butt up against this idea of data as being cold or kind of removed from mankind altogether. And on that note too, kind of adding a handmade touch to it, this mural was hand-painted over a course of 3 weeks, which I heard from our gallery team today. I was corrected, and by a team of about 8 gallery staff and 2 honors students. 3 of the teams were here today, so I encourage you to ask them more about that process if you're interested. But yeah, so on that note, you can kind of follow this kind of pattern that Laurie laid out for us with the music as you listen to the composition. And so with this idea of buttoning up, this idea of data as cold or artificial, it's handmade, warm, vibrant patterns, what Laurie aims to kind of point out is that we all have this inherent ability to recognize pattern, right? Some of us visual artists, we know all about pattern, and we recognize it every day. Musicians too, I see heads nodding. Musicians also recognize this pattern. But more than just artists or musicians, we as humans kind of tend to recognize patterns whether we realize it or not. And so that's part of what Laurie seeks to kind of highlight through her kind of data-centered work. So enough of me talking. As our lovely performers
tell you a little bit about why Elizabeth composed this piece in the first place. It's because it was an assignment. For the composition program, I coordinate the composition program in the music department. It's really important for our composers to actually write for live individuals, live performers, who can give them feedback, who can help them learn the intricacies and the ins and outs of writing for specific instruments. Even if our composers are playing to be digital musicians, write for video games or whatever, I think to do that well, then you have to know where that music comes from, and it has its roots in writing for acoustic instruments. So every semester, our department puts together an ensemble of professional musicians, 2 of which are faculty here at ACC, colleagues of mine. The composers get to work, if not once a month or twice a month, at least once a month, with these performers as they're writing a piece. So when Elizabeth was starting, she would bring in sketches. They would play it, they would talk with her about what was going on, and she would learn just by listening. And we do that for all of our composition majors. In one big group, we just film all in the band hall and go, basically. And out of it comes from some absolutely stunning music. I think last spring's concert, which included Elizabeth's piece, which was the first time we had made you guys write for voice, was an absolute success. A great deal of that success comes from those 3 performers over there. They did an awesome job. I don't know if you can imagine having to learn music that could be written in traditional ways or untraditional ways by composers whose work you've never heard before. It's quite a challenge, and you heard the result today. It was absolutely beautiful. So we were really excited about the success of that recital. By the way, this fall's recital is on Saturday, November 11th, right across the at her recital hall. Out of that, we had 12 or 13 composers' pieces. And when Peter and Olivia contacted me regarding this show, and said that they had an artist who was looking for a score to use as a basis for a visual piece, we were like, well, yeah, let's send them everything. And then Laurie chose Elizabeth's piece because I probably visually it matched what she was aiming for, or it created some kind of connection. And so I'm going to give the floor away to Elizabeth, and she can talk a little bit about how the mural connects with her own music. She created a piece, Laurie created a piece. They both come from the same place, and take it away.
Thank you for coming, everyone. As Dr. Saga said, my piece was an assignment, and I looked over the poems that other ACC students and faculty sent over for the project, and I read them, and I did not understand them. I didn't understand them, and they didn't resonate with me, so I went to a public domain website to look for a poem. And I focused, instead of the title, I focused on the first line. And the first line of this poem immediately caught my attention. And as I read through it, I realized, it really resonates with me and what I've been through. So when I started the process for writing each part, I wanted the clarinet to represent that feeling, the mood, basically. And it comes and goes. You'll notice that the clarinet does not play the entire time. She sometimes comes in and then she just fades away. And that was basically the mood, my mood, which every now and then I feel, and then suddenly it's not there anymore. And then I find it back again, and it's not there. That's why I wrote the clarinet to kind of disappear. And the voice was basically expressing the lyrics. I could have chosen to simply leave a vocal part and without lyrics, but I decided that singing the lyrics was very important to me, just so I could express my thoughts or the poem's thoughts across. And I did not intend for the piano to play a specific role. It was meant more for an accompaniment to help the vocalist find her tone, her key. But as I thought about it, I realized that the pianist plays the entire time, And it can kind of represent how life moves on, regardless of how you feel. And I thought, as I listened to the piece, I'm really glad and I'm really thankful for how well they've portrayed my thoughts and music. So when they asked me to speak, they wanted me to mention things that may not show up in the mural. So you know that the mural has focuses color and pitch, but what you might not notice in the mural is something musicians call dynamic, which is essentially how loud or quiet you play a piece. And an important dynamic in this piece is the clarinet, which, well, when you know it comes in, but then you notice that it fades out. It goes loud and then suddenly it's just quiet. And you can't find that in the mural, so that's something important musicians look at, and you'll never notice in this piece. Another thing is, if you look at in the booklet on page 12, you'll notice that there are two notes. I believe it's B and D, and they're the same color. And you'll find it in the mural, and you'll see a long line. If you did not have that booklet, or if you did not have the music sheet, you'll think of it as two beats. And that's something you would have assumed right away, but if you had the music sheet, you'd realize, oh, that's not one long note, that's two separate notes. So that's something I found interesting when I was looking over the mural and following my music. And I think that's something I found really interesting. When I actually walk across this hall a lot, and I peered into this room and I saw this mural, but I never realized it was based off of mine. So when I walked in here to discuss this event and they showed me this mural, I realized, I can see it. We were just talking about patterns in music and art, and when the very moment I realized this is my piece, I realized, yeah, I can see it. I can see the pattern in the vocal line. The colors, they match with how I imagine the pitch. You'll notice a lot of blue. That's because there's a lot of silence. The clarinet does not play a lot, so there's a lot of breaths in her part. And the vocalist, there's a lot of breaks for her to take breaths, so you'll see a lot of light blue in there as well. And because the clarinet is the only one who starts in the piece, that very first section is just entirely blue. And then when I realized this was my piece, I was like, yeah, I can see that. I now know this is my piece. So I found it interesting how the visual colors, the patterns, I immediately noticed that pattern because of I was so familiar with my own piece. And that's very interesting. That's the really amazing scene.
A lot of
weeks ahead of time, going through the music, talking with Laurie, and coming up with this way to execute the design, which was very, very complicated. And kind of to your point, it is missing things. And Bess and Ellen kept asking about those missing parts. And that's very intentional in Laurie's work, where she doesn't want it to be a complete transcription or translation of the piece. It's a new work that's connected, but not necessarily a blueprint, which I think is why you didn't immediately recognize it, but then when you did, that's part of the exercise, is finding the music in the mural, so it makes it a little bit more complex. But if you guys want to talk about color selection, you're the best people to talk about it.
Well, I think she chose them after hearing the piece, you know, so I do, she really did love the piece and thought it was beautiful in her design, and she also tried to choose 14 tones that were, I think, equidistant from each other, like on the color wheel, to try to make them, and she had to like express, you know, that this note is next to this note, and you know, a certain distance, so, and she had to take that into account when she made her palette.
Yeah, and that kind of choosing different colors is a good point, because I know you brought up that there's a lot of blues, which was really fun driving this for the beginning of this mural, because like, for example, this, it's basically all blue, but this one's a better example. It's actually all blue. Kind of choosing different colors that were from each other. And still like distinguishing that these are separate notes. But also making sure that they harmonize together too, because there are some contrasting colors here. But I think, even though these are very bright colors, I think it does kind of skew towards like a cool tone and a cool palette. A lot of it is because of all that blue. I think a lot of that also comes from the music itself. That's kind of the music resonates blue if there's any color. Any other thoughts or questions?
I was wondering, I mean, I love hearing about the color wheel methodology, but do we know if the artist is also synesthetic?
Well, that's a good question.
Is that what, you know, some people experience
I don't think she is. No. I mean, it's like she's more like black and white.
Gotcha.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, sure. That's a good point. But also, that type of background. But another thing to note too is that a lot of her music, or a lot of her work deals with music too. So for example, there's a work of hers that's called Your Brain on Music. And essentially, that specific work, from what I can tell, she had people listen to different types of music and kind of map their brain waves and assign colors for different types of music, like country pop and things like that. And they're kind of, it's in this really interesting painting installation. So each, they're like small circular glass circles that are suspended on kind of threads that you can't walk through, but it creates this sort of overlapping effect. In no way is it a graph or showing actually your brain on music, but it's still pulling from that data, kind of brainwaves, brain activity that happens when you listen to different types of music, and kind of translating that through color into the artwork. So music is something that should definitely kind of focus on specifically in other works apart from this mural. Any other thoughts or questions?
How long did it take you to write this particular piece?
The entire semester.
Okay.
It's a lot. Actually,
when I think about it, I question, could I have finished this sooner? Because I'm sure the performers and my professors know, I had a lot of tech difficulties. So my computer crashed or something, and then some of the price was gone. So I thought to myself, either this is entirely different from what I originally planned, or it's like, it took me even longer than to work on. It's fascinating. Like, this could be a different piece from what you started, and we don't know. So it's really interesting.
I'm sure you really were feeling the lyrics.
Every time I went first year, every time I went to the computer, I realized it's not there. Oh, that one. It resonates.
Did you have a question?
One, just learned how
the mood. But I noticed a lot of the bright colors, and I was kind of confused because of how like contrasting it is. And then I looked at the kind of the booklet and the heat, and I realized, oh, that's such a fascinating way to depict pitch. So I thought it was really cool on how like you could see the different notes. It really stood out to me when I walked in. That's I knew immediately right away that that's that one specific part in my music that I wrote because of the purple and yellows one right there. Those stood out to me immediately because of how contrasted it is, and then it reminded me of the piano piece just because of how I visualized the music.
Is there a relationship between the words and the colors?
I can't speak on behalf of the person who chose the colors, so no, but
Yeah. I'm not sure if there's a correlation between the lyrics and the colors. I think it was still, Laurie's focus was kind of on this idea of pattern. It's like how to depict that pattern through the different music notes. If anything, she was extremely focused on the music notes. But also, a lot of Laurie's work also touches on kind of juxtaposition and contrasting things. So the music itself, it does have this kind of forlorn idea, and kind of butting that up against really bright, vivid colors kind of goes along with kind of what's at the foundation of her work, which is putting this idea of data as being cold or artificial against the big, bright, vibrant, and big themes.
Okay.
So I think that's kind of another kind of arm of her kind of playing with that idea of juxtaposition.
Yeah, I think that's a great idea, and the way that this is, and kind of about this as well right now, the way this piece in some ways really relates to the felt pieces, which are, of course, don't touch them, but very tactile. They're visually something that you can have, they're very warm. And in the same way, the scale of it and also the shape of it, when you walk up to it, it's almost like you can be wrapped by the piece. And I think that's very intentional, and that's something that's consistent in her works, that there is this almost like tactile element to it, where it's this is enveloping it. And so listening to the music, the way we got to hear it today, and then seeing the work, I think that was full. This is almost like reactivated the whole mural in a new way for all of us that have been working with it.
So she basically, we gave her like plans of what the size of the wall was, sent it to her, and so she designed it specifically for this wall. So you can see she had to design around fire alarms and lights. So that was definitely part of the process of trying to dodge those things. And so she sent us like a diagram that had exactly what she wanted. So she wasn't available during this time, so we worked with her through emails, and then she came and visited, so that's when we talked to her about color choices, what the style was, of how she wanted us to paint it, and then we did like samples. So we painted samples and showed her like, these were, this is what we're thinking, and kind of got like her approval that way, like how she wanted the mural to look, and then we executed it.
Yeah, and it's an interesting part too, if you have any art history students out here. There's a long history of, this is definitely Laurie's design, it's Laurie's mural. There's a long history of artists working with, whole groups, especially with large works like murals. We really did need 8 people to get this on the wall by September 5th. And that kind of goes back through our history, things like Michelangelo, and different figures in our history didn't do all the work by themselves. They had whole studio assistants that kind of helped them accomplish these tasks. And that kind of bleeds into contemporary art today. So yeah, that's an example. And it's all a collaboration. Any other thoughts or questions?
I want to bring up the music on my iPad again because when I first heard it, I just heard a clip of it last week during another talk, and it sounds very artificial. It doesn't sound like, I don't know, was it just like computer generated or something? Okay, that makes sense. And immediately when I heard the live performance, I noticed is the dynamic, because the current comes so softly and then grows, and that was what was missing last time. Because I think that in summary, I feel like the biggest thing I'm taking away from it is, especially in the study of neurology, there's so many creations of how to depict data, and it's some really abstract stuff, and so this is just another iteration of how do we represent music. But it's really good illustration of how it doesn't capture everything, and by intent it didn't, but it also shows how data can capture information but not a soul. Because I heard a soul today, and that was like so beautiful. It's like completely different.
Yeah, so the performers are reading the music sheet that the iPad is using as well.
Mm-hmm.
And you'll notice how they interpreted the dynamics much differently from how a computer does. And that's why I actually love my composition class so much, because working with actual performers is so much more different than hearing whatever you wrote on a computer. It's such a different view.
And at first, when I heard the bitterness of the difference of tones being so close together because the room is very narrow, when you hear the words of it, it makes complete sense. And when you see the words by themselves, you don't hear them. So I am synesthetic, so I don't know. But all these come together so well. I think that every little piece is explained by the other parts of it. Beautiful. I appreciate it.
You just said AI just bothers me.
Yeah.
And that's what you just said.
Yeah,
Missing the
yeah.
soul a lot with AI. And this has just been beautiful. I'm so impressed with everybody here. This is blown away. And I love how, you're taking, I'm a scientist, and just to have the beauty of data and mathematics and how everything
xong bản nhạc rồi mọi người ơi, bây giờ đi về thôi. Nhưng mà con có hỏi thầy cô á, là bản nhạc của con á để giữ luôn hay là sao?
Con chưa hỏi tại hỏi cái khác thì con biết đâu.
Ồ vậy hả?
Với ba
Đi đường nào? Ba mới bị để chỗ hay rước Yến á. Đi đường này hả? Nhưng mà Yến có chuẩn bị sẵn không mà thấy Yến nói chuyện cũng gọi là
con suy nghĩ con muốn nói gì á. Trước nữa thì con viết ở trên giấy mà con không có đem lên, con không có nhớ gì đâu. Con nhớ con muốn nói cái này, con muốn nói cái này chị con nói luôn.
Con không có cầm giấy mà con nói cũng được đó.
Con mới thấy con nói biết nói gì phải không? Nên đó, tại con suy nghĩ con muốn nói gì.
Nhưng mà cũng ok, đâu có sao đâu. Nhưng mà có một số là học sinh hỏi Yến hả?
Có giống như con thấy có nhiều học sinh làm vẽ mà học sinh nhạc khác nhau. Mà có hỏi con suy nghĩ gì thôi, muốn nói
mình nghe.
Mình hỏi cái học sinh suy nghĩ gì chừng nào nghe với thấy cái hình á. Cái hình con không có biết cô làm gì hay suy nghĩ làm gì, con không có biết. Chừng nào thầy nói có cô chọn nhạc con
Đó là năm nhất hay năm thứ mấy?
Có
Đâu
cái
có biết bạn học năm mấy không?
không phải con không có hỏi, con có cô có chị em gái hỏi để hỏi muốn viết giấy dùng tên con để trên giống như cái trường newspaper hay gì á, giống như đó. Muốn hỏi tại có nhiều câu hỏi mà thì đi tới coi nhạc thấy cái hình á. Chứ tại con lên nói chuyện cái em gái có cái con answer cái question của em gái nói chuyện.
Mình không biết người ta mình quay không, cho nên lo không có quay mặt học sinh nha. Quay là bản nhạc với thầy cô thì được thôi. Tại vì học sinh cũng đang học bên âm nhạc á, cho nên lo không có quay nha. Ok thôi, long bye mọi người nha, hẹn mọi người sau nha.